Hey there, it's CJ Miller. I'm in Shreveport, Louisiana, across the Red River from beautiful Bossier City, Louisiana. And I'm having a great day. Um, Always fun things to do. Right down the street, there is the Lovewell Center, and they're doing the community Thanksgiving dinner. I'm not going because on Thanksgiving, I'm going to go to my sister's, and we're doing a family meal, and I don't want to be burnt out on the ham and turkey and things, But yeah, there's always fun things to do. Um, but anyway, I've just come in. Hang on, let me get a drink. Okay, so yeah, I needed to get a drink. I get a little winded when it's a little warm out. When coming back downtown, sometimes I'll get off on the Line Avenue bus on the Louisiana side of downtown, just by the overpass, and just walk the last 10 minutes to my apartment. And the other alternative for me is that I can go to the bus terminal and transfer to the downtown circulator and get off at about 2 blocks from where I live, walk up to, well, about 2 or 3 blocks from where I live. Or I can take another bus, and the other bus drops me off 1 block from my building, just outside of the apartment complex that I live in. It's a pretty big complex. So, um, but sometimes if it's a nice day, I'll just get off that and walk that 10 minutes, because maybe it's a little bit faster than going to the terminal and then taking a transfer and then coming back, whatever. Okay, so Um, oh, I know what I need to do is turn some air on. My apartment is pretty well insulated, and when I leave for the day, I can turn off the uh, the air, the central air. And I know there's this great debate over if you turn it off, you have to turn it back on. No, 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 no. Sometimes, in my situation, it is more economic to turn off the air conditioning when I leave versus leave it on constantly. And because the apartment's insulated, I will say that, and it heats up, um, yeah, pretty quick. I mean, it heats up or it cools off pretty quick. And so I'm gonna run some cool air. Last night here it was like thundering and storming, and it was cold, and then today it's warm. That's Louisiana weather for you in the fall. Okay, what do I want to talk about? Oh, yes, this wonderful culture that we have of tipping culture. Okay, so these are, this is just how it is. As late as the early 2000s, um, tipping culture, say in a restaurant, a typical restaurant would be 15% of your bill. 15%. Suddenly, people got this idea of tipping 20%. Um, yeah, we expect 20% of the. I don't know why the increase, but I do know one thing. It is not standard practice to tip the owner of a business, because the owner of a business they make money from the uh, employees that work for them. This goes for restaurants. It goes for hair salons. It goes for, like you don't tip the owner of a salon when you go get your hair done or your nails done or anything. Not unless you just feel moved to do so. But that's, it's understood that the owner makes money from the employees that work there, and gets a percentage of, like, when you go to a hair salon, whatever, and get your hair cut, colored, or something like that, and then you pay that bill. That person that's working that station, that chair, whatever, they're usually paying a rental. They're not usually like an employee. They're usually paying a rental. They are paying the owner of the shop. So Yeah, if and then the owner of the shop, typically they charge a little bit more for their services. They're like an advanced or whatever. So you doesn't. I'm sorry if it's hurting anyone's feelings. It is not tipping standard to tip the owner of a business. The owner of a business that has employees working for them, especially. It's not, you know. Okay. Uh, it is not standard tipping practice to tip on the tax. You tip on the subtotal. And so how this works for me is that this is just something that, and we talked about this when I worked in salons and everything, and we were greedy. And when I worked in restaurants also, we were greedy about the tips. We like, tip, 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 tip. I hope we get a tip, whatever. And, it's like, if you're not making money, you need to go work at a business where the tips are going to help you make money. If you feel like that, but you don't sweat your customers for the tips. You don't. If someone comes in and they're like, "How are you doing?" and then small talk turns into your waiter or your driver or your nail tech or whoever it is that's to be tipped. If they start talking about how terrible their day is and how they're not making any money, I haven't hardly made any tips at all, blah blah blah, that is very poor consumer relations. Your customers don't care about your financial problems. We come out. I'm a person. I don't have a lot of money. When I go out to have a bite to eat or something, it's I don't go out to talk about people's money problems. We don't want to hear about if you're a server in a restaurant, or if you're a man. We don't want to hear about your personal problems. We don't want to hear about your family problems. We don't want to hear about if you're doing that, that's why you are going to get $1.25 rather than getting $12. Like seriously, that's why you're working in. That's why you work in where your tips are not very big. Because you haven't learned that etiquette yet. I'm sorry. It's whatever. If you need a guaranteed salary, go work somewhere where the tips aren't where the tips don't determine your income, but you have a guaranteed salary, and that determines your income. Work for what you're worth, But when it comes to tipping, professions that rely on tipping, then you damn well better act like it. And if you're walking around on the floor and you're talking trash, and especially about your other employees or your other customers that just left before this customer is being served or something, you know what I mean? It's like we don't want to hear about that either. All your grievances and all your garbage and everything. The one concern I had when I was on a Carnival cruise, and I did not make a formal anything. I didn't say anything. I just because it was a great time anyway, and so I'm not going to let one comment spoil the event. And Carnival will fire people like in a heartbeat over like one small little. If you're not if those people are not pleased, the people who sail and everything, if they're not pleased, they will. I don't want anyone to lose their job. I don't want to be responsible for someone being fired. Say, but there was one person. There was she was a bartender, and she was just walking around talking to her other bartender people, and she was just griping about. Boy, if they put me back on this again and that, now I'll just blah, 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 blah. And it's like, maybe if you're griping and you're unhappy and everything in front of your customers on a pleasure cruise ship, you might, the wrong person might overhear that and then make a complaint or something. But so we don't want to hear about all that. Be it being on a boat, being in a restaurant, you know what I mean? You don't want that. Now everybody gets to vent. Has a need to vent or something like that. And I try to be a little compassionate, but don't bring it Don't bring it to the consumers. Um, oh, I used to see these. I don't do Facebook anymore. I don't know if they're still out there. They used to be this whole big old thing about people would argue over the tip amounts. In England, the standard tip is 10%. It's a standard 10%. That's the United Kingdom. And because I used to work in New Orleans and we had people come over, and I worked in Miami too, port cities. We had people come in from different countries, and they're different. They're different customs or whatever. And they would ask, "What is the standard here?" or whatever. And it's like, what I do is I look at the tax. And then I deduct the tax from the subtotal. So really what I'm doing is I'm looking at the subtotal, and then I'll double the subtotal, and then I will pay 20% on the subtotal. And that roughly figures to about 15% on the total of the bill anyway. So, and it's fine. However, I think that's fair, and that's fine. And the thing of the matter is, if the business itself is not drawing in enough, that a pretty decent tip, and I'll estimate up, you know what I mean? Like if it's whatever, if it's a percentage or something, I'll estimate up. Um, but this, I'm not going to go to, a coffee shop where they make my coffee using espresso that they had made previously, and they're keeping it in a jug so they can just pour that espresso off. No, if you're not making my coffee bean fresh, from grind, if you're not really, really doing it from scratch, but you're making espresso. If you're fast tracking my espresso drink, you're not going to get that quality tip. You're going to get that 25, 50 cent change dropped in your jar. But if you actually do what you're supposed to do and make my coffee quality, and it's from fresh, freshly brewed espresso, and then you make the coffee drink with fresh, instead of pouring off some espresso in a jug or something. You know what I mean? It's that. We have a. I'm not going to mention it because I do like the coffee shop, but it is it's a coffee shop in town. There's a couple of them actually under the same thing, and what they do is they actually grind and brew the coffee in a warehouse setting, and they bring it to their two retailers, their two coffee shops. And it's like, I guess it's a good way for quality control, but that espresso has already been made. And they will make the coffee fresh, but it's at a big huge thing. So it's not like you're getting like fresh coffee. It's like your coffee's been sitting there for about 30, 45 minutes. When the coffee drink is like that, and then when the espresso is it's kept cold but then heated up at at the time of the order. If it's like that, I'm really sorry. I'm not gonna give a premium tip on a coffee that is not a premium coffee. That's just not the way that this guy rolls. And even then, you're just making a drink. You're probably not going to get on a coffee that costs $8. You're not going to get that other $2 out of me. You're just not going to do it. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Especially since you don't make waiter salaries. Waiters still get paid $2.25. And what happens is, when they get so much in tips, the scale tips over. They're making so much in tips that they do have to pay their taxes on. in that way, they're actually bringing it down. And so what a lot of places, it's a little shifty. A lot of restaurants uh, will manage their business in a way that, hey, you don't have to claim all of your tips. We won't make you claim all of your tips, but you do have to claim so many tips that we don't have to pay you a salary. And if you're a newer employee, and you're not working the greatest tips, you're making maybe working those lunch shifts, and you're not getting that uh, thing, especially when you have to, like for instance, and I will call you out, Copeland's of Shreveport. I worked for you very briefly, and then I got enough, and one day I walked out. So what they do at Copeland's, especially with the new employees, and I will say this, and this was, 25, 22, 23 years ago, whatever. Enough time's passed, I can say this. And it may be different now, I don't know. The manager, his name was Todd, over the whole place. He had obviously he was stressed because he had a stressful attitude towards the people that he worked with. But basically, now I liked Jerome. He was the assistant manager. He was good, but Todd was just not. And like he would just get like snappy and snarky, and it was like, hey, don't you mouth off to me. As an employee, I would have to like assert, hey man, just kind of, you don't, this wasn't working. It just didn't work out. But here's the thing. I did most of my shifts were lunchtime shifts, and I had a few tables, but then out of my tips, I had to tip out the manager. It's one of the weird places where they ask you to tip out the manager, tip out the bartender. Actually, I don't recall if I tipped out the manager there, but I do know that I tipped out the bartender, who the bartender got their bartender salary, plus they got tipped out from all the servers, and they were making bank even when the servers weren't making that much money. And it was like, yeah. So there were times when I'd go work a shift and I actually would lose cash money in the transaction, because even if I didn't, they'd want me at Copeland's to claim enough tips that they wouldn't have to pay a check. I mean, there was like, it was obligatory. It was in their rules that I had to do that. Well, on this shift, that's fine, but then I have to tip out, and I do think the hostess, and then the food runner, and then the bartender, and this and that, and it was a automatic tip out. They're like, we had to do it. So there were some times between what I could not, if I had to claim all the tips, that I made, plus pay all that out, I had to pay taxes on what I was having to tip out. And so, wow, no, I'm losing money, and then I'm not even being able to claim tips on it or whatever. It was not a good work situation in that kind of way. And in that time, I really had to make the decision, hey, Copeland's for me. I'm not working for Copeland's. There was one other restaurant that I worked at that was kind of like that. And it was Emeril's Delmonico in New Orleans. I think Emerald sold Delmonico. It may even have closed down. I don't know. That's the word that I've got, but I'd have to check into it. But when I worked at Delmonico's on St. Charles in New Orleans, it had been bought by Emeril Lagasse. That guy, bam, the chef that's out of St. Louis, that clings to his Cajun heritage. And they have a claim to it. St. Louis was part of the Louisiana Purchase. They have as much claim to a Cajun heritage as any part of the Louisiana Territory that became the Louisiana Purchase, that eventually got shrunk down to just the state of Louisiana. I'm not gonna say that they don't. As a matter of fact, they make a Louisiana hot sauce out of Louisiana, Missouri. So, if you're looking for a hot sauce that comes out of the state of Louisiana, you really want to look around and check it out. A good one is Crystal. That's out of Metairie, Louisiana. But anyway, this hot sauce, this Emeril Lagasse had Emerald's Delmonico, and that was my first fine dining. I loved, because I felt proud to work there, and I learned a lot. But I started as a back waiter. And that was someone who brought the bread, the water, the sodas, the teas, that type of stuff. And then, of course, we'd help with the clearing and busting of the tables or whatever. But yeah, I'd go in for lunch and I'd work that lunch shift, and then we'd have a we'd have a we'd have a break for dinner, or for our dinner break in between the shifts, and then we'd work that night shift. And so for that whole day, I maybe would go home with 50 bucks in tips, and so and that's a little low end there. I'm going home with like 50 bucks for the whole day. That didn't sit well with me, so I didn't stay there. Plus, that was one of those, like, as soon as I started working there, they tried to have me work, and we worked in teams of three: a captain and a front waiter, and then the back waiter. So, but the captain on the team they had me working with was just extremely aggressive. He was just a big, huge, giant guy. I don't know if it was a cultural thing or something like that, but he had this notion that he was going to refer to me as Cinderella, like, how Cinderella had to do all the scrubbing and stuff like that and everything. And I was like, I'm not going to let you make that reference to me. And then he was like, and if you don't do it right, we'll have to just go talk to the boss about you. And I'm like, well, let's go talk to the boss or whatever. As a matter of fact, I'll do it for you. And so I that was when we were coming back from vacation, actually. And we had, and I was still working his shift, and I was like, I can't work for this person. I can't work on his team. This is his attitude. I can't do it. So I either need to work. My first request was to work at a different restaurant, but they actually just switched my team, to a better team. But it's like, nobody who has that type of treatment or attitude of the people who work for them should ever be a team captain. Like, Emerald's Delmonico should have taken that guy to the side and said, hey, we're going to demote you from your captain. You can't talk to your people like that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring you back down, maybe to front waiter or something, and give you a little bit more on the job training on that. That's what they should have done, but they did not do that. They simply just moved me to a different, and it's like, that's fine for me, but it didn't really didn't solve the problem. And it did kind of create an uncomfortable situation. Anyway, I worked there for a few months, and I was saving money to move to Miami anyway. So, and then I moved to Miami, and of course, ended up working for the White Lion Cafe, and I love those people. And this is where I learned a lot about, the tipping culture, because, when you do like a mandatory tip and you go to the register and it's that, place where you have like 5 or 6 people sitting up at tables, and you say we add the tip when you have that many people or whatever. So the register would add that tip, but on the subtotal, not on the total of the tip. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not supposed to tip anyone who tips. You are to fairly, with all fairness, you are to disregard the taxes. You do not pay tips on taxes. Why? Because you're paying taxes to the government to do the duty. Some other countries call it a duty fee, but we call them taxes. So you pay the taxes. That's how the government does what it does. When you pay tipping on top of the taxes, that tipping does not go to the government. That tipping goes right back into the servers. And so they're getting extra tip on, like tip tip for the amount of the subtotal. Figure that, and you say, and then so that's what you figure. I'm going to do 15 to 20%, whatever. whatever. And if they do an outstanding job, and if you decide you want to tip more, but do understand that you are not to tip the owner of a business unless you just want to. Tipping culture does not include tipping someone who pours your drink into a cup and puts a straw in it and hands it to you. That's up to you whether if you want to tip or not, but it's not obligatory. They're not living on tips, and otherwise their salary is $2.25. No. Anyone who has that tipping salary of $2.25, that minimum wage, $2.25, and then you tip on top of that, then that's fine. You feel free to tip, but you don't need to worry about tipping taxes. Anyway, that's my little talk on tipping. So, and I'm not being a miser. I'm just stating the cultural standard that was in place, and that was when the tipping was 15% of the bill. And the reason why it's figured out to 15% is because people would just, I don't know, but that's the way it was. And then around the millennium, people started talking about 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. Hey, if you feel like you want to, it's okay. You can do that. I am usually a across the board 20% tipper, but I 20% on the subtotal. I don't tip on taxes, and I'll do the 20% and then round up. So if it's like if the tip is supposed to be like $19.46, then I'll go ahead and round up and throw that $20 bill down or whatever. So what do you think? If someone does an extra job and I have that little extra money, maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll throw it down. Or if it's the holidays and I'm feeling holiday bonus and stuff, yeah. If I'm blessed that I have a little bit of money extra that I can do that, sure, I'll do that. But the fact is, I live on a fixed income. I don't have an exceptional amount of free money. Now, there is something else I used to see. When I had my Facebook account, the meme would float around. It would be, if you don't have the money to tip, then you don't have the money to eat out. Let me tell you something. This goes back to what I was talking about initially. People walking around talking about, how was your day? Oh, no, I didn't make any tips. It's a shitty day, whatever. I don't care about that. But on top of that, I think that is equal to somebody living on the street, begging for money on the street. Not to put that down, but I mean, I've been out there. I've lived outside. I've been homeless. But I never, in my homelessness, and for a few times, I never panhandled on the street. I just could never. I could never do that. I could never represent myself in that way, because there's always some sort of means to a hustle, that there's always some sort of side gig or some sort of something. There's always something. But I was never going to get stuck in that lifestyle. That was never going to happen. It's like I found myself there, but okay, that's cool. Here I am. I'm outside. I'm homeless. I did it to myself, and I'm going to get myself out of it. I'm going to, and there are social programs that help with that, but I could never stand the treatment. My pride would not let me just go to a random person and say, hey, can you give me some spare change or whatever. And I just, I couldn't, and I would never, as someone who was working in an industry that accepted tips. Now, as a cosmetologist, when I was a cosmetologist, I made decent money at the salon that I worked at for a while, Tui's Total Image. I don't know if it's still there, as a matter of fact. But I would never push for tips. How was your day? Well, it would be going better if people knew how to tip. I would never say something like that, And if if I'm working, if I'm a consumer and I do that, I think that's the same thing as basically begging on the street. That's the same low living that you're doing. You're begging. If the job that you're making is not, I'm sorry. It's no, it's terrible. Um, but there, like I said, there have been times when I found myself working. I made more money working at a diner, the White Lion Cafe. I made more money working there than I made working at Emerald's Delmonico as a server, a back server, back waiter or whatever. But still, uh, I made more money working, at White Lion Cafe. My problem there is that I was actively addicted. So a lot of it I smoked up and tooted up and popped up, whatever. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad that part's behind me. Um, but yeah, but this meme that I used to see on Facebook, if you can't afford to tip, you can't go out to eat. There are people who live on a fixed income, and maybe they're not going to tip you the amount that you want to get tipped. But think about it like this. Those are the people who are your bread and butter. Those are the people that can afford to go out to eat, and they're not special event tippers. That's as part of their life. They don't cook at home, maybe because especially a lot of retirees or whatever. It's maybe they just can't. Uh, and maybe it's a lot of work and the cleanup and everything like that. So they go out to eat instead. And you'll see a lot of Piccadilly Cafeteria, the Golden Corral. You'll see a lot of seniors there and stuff like that. And if you can't tip, you can't eat or whatever. Your bread and butter. Those clients are your bread and butter. The ones that are not giving you your big tips. It's those people that allow your business to stay open so that you get other consumers that do come in that do have more money for bigger tips and stuff like that. So watch your attitudes. If I see someone online and I know who they are and they're talking about if you can't afford to tip, you can't afford to go out to eat, that's fucking fine. Whether or not I can afford to tip or not, and I can, and I do tip well. But when I see that, I will avoid sitting in that person's station. I will go to a business where that person does not work, so I can. You know what I mean? I don't do ingratitude. I do gratitude. I don't do ingratitude. So and yeah, attitude will mean a lot. Attitude will elevate me in my life, or attitude will cause me to have some consequences. If I've got a bad attitude, then I'll have to suffer those consequences of my bad attitude. So attitude means everything. When I find myself in moments where I'm being chastised, either by word or by deed or whatever, then I need to take that hit and say, maybe if I bite my lip and wait till those emotions pass, I can come back later, a couple of days, and have a little talk and say, you're my boss or whatever, and I respect you. I don't see things the way that you see things. I mean, it's like there have been times I've had to have that conversation. Then there are times when I found myself so uh, overwhelmed that it would no. There have been times when it's been time to leave the job. That time, especially working with Copeland's when I got back here, it was like, oh hell no. It's I don't mind working lunch shifts where there's not a lot of people and the prices are less and this and that. But if I'm going to be tipping out, if I'm basically going to be not making money and in fact often losing money because of the amount that I had, because you have to claim it. You have to say, hey, I'm making this much so that these 4 hours, your restaurant doesn't have to pay me my $2.25, does it? Or $2.13 or whatever it is, whatever the amount was. It may have been $2.13 at the time. Whatever it is that I make, if it's not very much, because I only had a couple of tables and they're only ordering like the half sandwich or something like that or whatever, and so I'm not making big tips. but then I'm having to claim more than I'm actually making because that's the policy of the company that I work for. And then I'm having to pay out to the bartender when maybe people didn't even order bar drinks. They ordered tea and soda, which I got myself. Why would I tip out a bartender that didn't make any drinks for me, you know? So yeah, no, that whole setup was just wrong. It was just completely, uh, yeah, uh, yeah, not good. So that was a job that I looked at and I made the decision, hey, it's better for me to go get another job. And I did. I did. I left that job. And then, of course, the guy I was living with at the time said, well, we're going to be taking a vacation in a few weeks. So don't you worry about getting a job for about 3 weeks. And then we're going to go on our vacation and then we'll come back. Then you can get another job because there's no sense in you getting a job if we're going to take the vacation. So that's fine. That's fine. We did it that way. And so, yeah. But, yeah. People who work for tips, yeah, let's keep our personal problems off of the floor, because that will turn someone like me off in a heartbeat. I will not take sympathy and give you more money if you're griping about your life. If you're burdening me with your problems when I've come into a place to enjoy and sit back and just have my soup and sandwich and just kind of let the whatever, for whatever, it's a time for relaxation and replenishment, and that includes an emotional time for emotional and spiritual replenishment. It's a sit down, calm time, and if my server is having all these personal problems, I don't know, I can't fuck with them. So keep that in mind. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Do you have a formula for how you tip, or do you just tip on how you feel? What do you think? What do you think? And consider that there is a difference between a very large city, say like Houston, Dallas, New York, Miami. That culture is very different than, say, a small town like Homestead, Florida, where it's really just small diners and things like that. So it's you can consider your vibe. But yeah, let me know what you think. I'm interested. Okay, love and light. Peace. Bye.